Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Three Questions with. I'm really excited today to have Ochuko Adekoya with us, who is the Director of Communications and Brand at Onside, who build incredible spaces for young people in disadvantaged areas. So, really pleased to have you here. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for asking me.
So, if we go straight into it, so let's start with that dreaded dinner party question. So, what do you actually do again?
Yeah, and that question is, it can be answered quickly or it can be a longer answer. But I suppose the way I always think about it is trying to, first of all, explain what communications is in a professional context. And how I always tend to do that is by getting people to understand that, every organization, whatever it might be, whatever size or scale, it relies on people, and it relies on people to think something or feel something or do something. And I would describe those people that an organization relies on as its stakeholders. And in order for somebody to do something with an organization, they've got to understand and trust that organization. So, for example, if I'm going to put my hand in my pocket and buy myself a new car or a new dress, I need to have some sense that I trust the organization that I'm going to buy that from. My job and the job of people like me is to help organizations create that trust, create that understanding in order to create some sort of action. So in the world that I work in at the moment, I work in the charity world. Specifically, I work for a charity called Onside. And what Onside does is build large scale, so we're talking £10 million build youth centres called youth zones in areas of economic disadvantage. My job as the Director of Communications for Onside is to create the strategy that makes all of those pieces of communications not only happen, but happen in a way that makes sense and happen in a way that is cohesive and ensures that that trust is built and maintained over time. So it
Yeah.
really is about people who an organization relies on over here, what that organization is trying to achieve over here, and
No.
that trust and reputation in the middle that helps to make those two things connect.
Trust is something that hasn't come up directly. It's been
Mm.
one of those things that a few people have touched on, but the trust thing's really interesting, right? Because it means different things to different organizations.
Yeah.
Some, if you're selling toothpaste or a pharmaceutical product or anything that's
Mm.
highly regulated, your trust is almost built into your product, right? So trust in your organization means something different. But where it's trust where you need people to put their hands in their pockets and you're then running centers that look after young people, the trust is an essential business function for an organization like Onside, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's fundamental. And, even right down to the reality of the sector that we're in. So if you think about youth provision, youth centres, typically people talk about youth provision as a past tense thing. They say, bring back the youth centres. Where are the youth centres?
Yeah.
But those kind of examples, which are really common and we hear them all the time, are quite a challenge from a comms perspective because
Yeah.
you're not you're talking to stakeholders who may not have experienced this thing themselves or
Yeah.
who may have experienced a very different version of this thing themselves.
Mm.
So our centres are open 7 days a week. They have like full scale climbing walls, recording studios, 30 to 50 trained youth workers in there, and all of these things that don't necessarily track with what somebody might believe a youth centre is.
Yeah.
So we're having to overcome that kind of lack of understanding. And then you're going into a place where they may not have heard of the brand Onside before. And, you are having to overcome a certain amount of suspicion, a certain amount of who are these people and what they're doing here, a certain amount of worry that perhaps, this thing's going to come in and scoop up all the funding and all the money, et cetera, et cetera.
Ah,
And our model is such that we bring private funding into places. And so it's a net positive for a place. But we've got to do a lot of work to explain to local partners and local
it's not
communities that
council.
exactly. And it's not taking money from the council, from other provision. We bring philanthropy into a place. And therefore, the council has that trust that this thing is going to not only open successfully, but sustain over time. So we've
Yeah.
got that sort of trust. But then you've also got kind of more kind of emotional trust drivers when it comes to the young people that are going to walk through our doors. So if you think about how life has changed for young people over the past 5, 10, 20 years, any of you think about our experiences growing up, got helicopter parenting, right? So parents like track their children to school and track their children back, and evolution is generally good. But when you have that environment in which young people are growing up, and then we're a new unknown provision saying, trust us, send your children here. You drop your children at the door, and we say bye bye, because it's important that it's a child centered space.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
has to be a lot of work done, and we do a lot of work in our communities to make sure that parents understand, and comms is a big part of not only telling the individual stories, but also collating that kind of collective impact. So comms is really important in kind of translating impacts and turning it into proof points,
When you're telling
constituents. So
stories for all of the different stakeholders, right, and that's a huge number as you do. So it's coming up with messaging that works across all those different platforms must be really challenging.
it's challenging, but also it's just about being intentional. And I think all good communicators is intentional. You've got to really be clear what you're saying, why you're saying it, and who you're saying it to.
So I think you know that's the thread, right, in your career. In some ways, yes, you started out on the agency side before moving in house, and trust has been key to all the organisations that you've worked with. Looking back over your career to this point, is there if you could go back and offer your more junior self, we won't say younger, more junior self,
No, younger, sadly. Yeah, very much younger.
is there one piece of advice you'd offer?
I mean, I'm a common person, so I'm allowed like 3 key messages, right? So maybe 2 or 3. No, certainly there's kind of 2 things that are kind of connected, and it's a bit glib maybe, but I'll try and explain it. So I think saying yes is really important, and by that I mean that when you look back over like a 20-25 years of working life, and the different things you've done and the different opportunities that led to the next opportunity, it led to the next opportunity. It looks very cohesive when you look back, but when you're in it, it doesn't necessarily make sense. And all you know is that you are taking an opportunity and seeing what will happen. And then by putting, it's about putting one step in front of the other. So I think saying yes is a really important thing. It can unlock opportunity. Often that saying yes is within roles and within organizations. You might come into an organization with this job title and this remit of things that job title is supposed to achieve. But sometimes opportunities arise. It might be as simple as leading a project. It might be as simple as a working group on X. It might be a committee within your organization. In the past, I have, done things like led, ED&I groups within organizations, or working groups on particular kind of ways of working, or whatever it might be. Just say yes and just do it and figure it out later. And I do think sometimes you can be your own worst enemy in waiting for everything to be perfect. There's lots of decision making throughout a career, small and large, and sometimes the small decisions are actually, in hindsight, quite big decisions. So I
Totally.
do think when you figure out the details later and just say yes, often that unlocks a way of testing yourself, resilience that you might not have realized you had, skills that you may not have realized that you had, interests that you may not realize that you have. And I suppose the flip side of that, which sounds like a contradiction, but it is about saying no. And what I mean by that is PR, comms, external relations, particularly actually when you're in the charity sector and you have like a deep personal passion towards your cause, your
Yeah.
organization, but it tracks across in the private sector too, is that we can be always on. And I think certainly the beginning of my career, there wasn't the conversation that we have now around well-being, around mental health. Like that conversation didn't exist. I have very clear memories of being, my first job in an agency, being on holiday, and like literally being on a sun lounge and knowing that there was a pitch for a new client that week, and like scribbling down like pitch ideas and like testing them on my poor husband, who was like why, and then emailing them across to my account director. I think it's really important to build in and cultivate mental health at work, and cultivate a way of working that allows you to, yes, work really hard, and like, yes, put in the hours when you need to, but balance that out. And that comes down to also like choosing where you're going to work, choosing what sector you're going to work in. And again, slightly going off piece, but I do think it's thinking about what kind of career you want, what kind of life you want to live, and ensuring that work enables that, and that you are not sacrificing everything
I think it's a really good way.
on the altar of on
It's
the
what Yeah, and as you said, it's what career you want and what life you want to lead, and they're not mutually exclusive.
Agree.
They're completely connected to one another.
Exactly. And I think that's where values come in. That's where when people are looking on about where they're moving to, and or if they're looking to move job or looking for a different organization to work for, like what are those values? What is that culture? I'm really lucky where I work and it's something that we as a senior team are really passionate about, and we are one trying to lead by example, but also make sure there are active conversations in our organization about well-being. And I think it's important to work for organizations that align with your values and with, as to the previous point, what kind of life do I want to live? Actually, if I've got these amazing hobbies that I enjoy outside of work, is it sensible to go down a path of work where you know you're never going to be able to do those hobbies? I think it's important. And I think the healthier you are in the minds, the better you are at your job, and the more able you are when you are at work to give everything that you can give. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's again really really sound advice. And so, if you weren't working in comms and external relations, what would you be doing?
So, like for a long time, from quite young, from sort of 7 to 8 years old, I wanted to be a journalist. I love writing. I was really curious person, really nosy, quite a quiet, quite an introvert, but quite interested in people.
Uh-huh.
In the course of university, I discovered this thing called PR. We had these two young women who came in from a PR agency, and so having not really been that interested in the typical corporate milk round stuff,
Yeah.
that was it. I don't think I went to a single one of those things. I went to this talk. So I was like, oh, public relations, what's that? And literally heard these young women at the time talking about their job and and they were in the kind of consumer PR world, and I thought really interesting and went down that path. So I've been in PR for so long. So journalism probably is the right answer, but actually, if I just park my childhood, I want to be a journalist thing, I
Mm.
think I'd be in television in some way. So I really like, do you remember the early noughties, sort of 2005, 2006, that era of reality television where
Yeah.
it was pure and where there was no social media really, and so
Ozzy
therefore
Osbourne.
it was a bit of an experiment, and it was storytelling, and it
Oh yeah.
was unexpected storytelling. And there's a show that I remember fondly that no one really remembers called The Family. I think there were two or three series. There's one with a Nigerian family that hence why I think I sort of connected to it. But there's a couple of other series, and they just put cameras all over this family's house, and they just filmed, and it was so authentic, and it had such ups and downs, but it didn't feel like reality TV as now. So it would be
Yeah.
kind of a early noughties reality TV producer, which is very niche. But there was something really experimental and interesting and new and exciting about seeing people as people that we hadn't seen before, I don't think,
And
that I
also,
really, really loved. Yeah.
wasn't like at that point there wasn't this fear of, oh, we can't celebrate the mundane. It was almost like the whole point is kind of the mundane day to day, and there are
Yeah.
these pockets of brilliance that come from it, or
Yeah.
these, and actually it's about the way it connects back to my life that makes it interesting. And then
Exactly
eventually
that.
reality TV just became performative, right? And it's modern day soap operas,
It's
basic.
yeah, it's a whole different thing, isn't it? But yeah, that authenticity, that rawness, I think the storytelling, I think the relatability of, and also like people as characters. I'm sure we all have characters in our family and our friendship groups, and people you think, oh God, if people could see how funny they were. And I think there was something like that happening in television at that time that I think would have been magic to be part of. So maybe, yeah, maybe a TV producer flying the flag for like authentic storytelling.
Yeah, some advancements are good, some not so much,
Some
I
are
guess.
good, some less so. Exactly, exactly. Hopefully, all ultimately net positive.
Thank you so much, Chico. That was really good, and particularly enjoyed the kind of conversation around trust and what that means. So I'm sure people are going to really enjoy listening to this. So thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so much.